Ever imagine a world, and I mean this, a world where molecules smaller than, like way smaller than a human hair could change, like revolutionize how we power our homes, or even like how doctors diagnose diseases?
We're talking about things that we can barely even fathom, you know? It's like the nanoscale. But it's not science fiction. This is the promise of self-assembling nanostructures.
That's exactly what we're diving into today, right?
It is. We're taking a deep dive into one really cool type, Perylene Imides. PIs, we call them.
PIs. Okay, so PIs, for those of us who, don't have a PhD in chemistry, what are we talking about here?
Imagine, think about a molecule that's not content just existing, right? They want to organize, they want to build. They're like the overachievers of the molecular world. And by getting to know the forces that drive this self-assembly thing, we can basically program them to form, really useful structures.
So are we talking like molecular architects here? We're using these PIs as our building blocks, kind of.
Exactly. And get this, the structures, they're mind-blowing. We're talking nanowires, nanobelts, even these tiny little helices, all these crazy shapes. And they all have unique properties that could change the game in, tons of fields, solar energy, electronics, even medicine.
Okay, so I did my homework and read this scientific review paper we're using as a jumping off point. And it describes PIs as having this natural-born ability to stack together. They're like those tiny Lego blocks, right? But what makes them such eager stackers?
Chemistry, baby. Pure chemistry. Okay, so picture this. PIs, they have these flat, disc-shaped cores made of carbon and hydrogen atoms. And these cores, they're just drawn to each other. It's like a chemical attraction, It's called stacking, but basically they can't resist snuggling up together.
But they just have to connect and build. It's in their DNA.
Pretty much. But it gets even cooler. So we can actually add different chemical groups to the edges of those little discs, like little side chains.
Well, we're customizing the Legos here.
Exactly. And those side chains, they can totally change how they stack and what kind of structures they form.
Okay, so we're not building just any random structure. We're talking about building structures that can do incredible things. So let's talk about some of those mind-blowing applications. One that I thought was super cool from the paper was the potential for PIs in, get this, solar energy. I mean, who wouldn't want to power their home with more, with more efficiency using the SNN?
Absolutely. PIs could be game changers when it comes to that. They're insanely good at absorbing light, especially the wavelengths in sunlight. Imagine a solar panel, right? But it's coated with PIs. It could capture way more light than those old school silicon-based panels.
So instead of wasting sunlight, we've got these PIs, and they're like super efficient light harvesters.
Exactly. And it gets even better. Once they snag that light, PIs can transform it into electrical energy. They can do that because of how their electrons are structured. They move super efficiently.
Okay, so they capture the light, NEID, they channel that energy. Sounds like a recipe for a seriously powerful solar cell.
Yeah.
What's the holdup? Why don't we have PI-powered homes already?
If I had $1 for every time someone asked me that, it's the question, right? Look, the potential is huge, GE, but there are still some speed bumps we got to get over. One of the biggest, we got to figure out how to arrange those PIs into the best possible structures, to really maximize that solar energy capture.
Right, because we were talking about those side chains that affect how they stack, so it's all about finding the perfect combo.
Bingo. Finding the right side chains and the right conditions, it's the key to unlocking their full potential for these solar cells. It's a huge area of research right now.
So it's like tweaking a recipe, trying to perfect it. Got it.
Yeah.
What about other applications? The paper mentioned PIs being used as sensors, which sounds super high-tech. How does that work?
Okay, so get this. PIs are super sensitive to their surroundings, right?
Yeah.
So we can actually design those side chains to interact with very specific molecules in the environment. It's wild.
Okay, so it's each PI is a watchdog, but instead of barking, it changes its properties to alert us.
Exactly. Let's say a pollutant or, even a sign of a disease comes into contact with the PI. Boom. It triggers this change that we can measure. And the best part, we can design those side chains to target basically any molecule.
So we're talking sensors for everything. Explosives, pollution, even sniffing out diseases before they become a big deal.
You got it. It's all about those side chains. And because we can design them so precisely, the sky's the limit for PI-based sensors. We could be talking about levels of sensitivity and accuracy that we've never seen before.
That's incredible. It's like a whole new level of sensing capabilities, all thanks to these tiny little self-assembling molecules.
Huh.
Okay, so this is all amazing. But before we go too far, I want to back up for a second. How do scientists actually control these PIs? You said we can tweak things to guide their self-assembly. What does that actually involve?
Okay, imagine we're setting the stage for a molecular dance party, right? We can change what we call the solvent or the temperature, even toss in other molecules that'll interact with the PIs. And each of those little changes, they can totally influence how those PIs get together and ultimately what the final structure looks like.
So we're choreographing this whole elaborate molecular dance, and the PIs are like our star dancers. That's a cool way to think about it. What's the most fascinating or unexpected structure, like dance move, that scientists have managed to create using this technique?
Oh man, there's so many cool ones. But one that comes to mind is, get this, the shish kebab structure. It's this wild arrangement where you've got PIs alternating with these long polymer chains. It's like meat and veggies on a skewer, but, molecular style.
Hold on. A molecular shish kebab. Okay, I did not see that one coming.
Yeah.
But why is it so special? What makes this particular structure so interesting?
The coolest thing is this alternating shish kebab setup. It gives the material enhanced properties, way better than if you just had the PIs or the polymers by themselves. It's like they bring out the best in each other.
Okay, so it's not just about the individual ingredients, it's about the architecture, right? Like how we arrange them at the nano level makes all the difference. This is like next level materials design. Mind-blowing.
That's what makes it so exciting. Every day we're finding new ways to manipulate these molecules, and it's leading to these totally new materials with crazy properties. We're just scratching the surface.
Speaking of scratching the surface, we've only just started with what PIs can do.
Yeah.
People are looking at them for everything. Flexible electronics, super advanced lasers, you name it. What else is out there? What are scientists geeking out about these days?
One area that's really heating up is using PIs to build the next generation of transistors.
Wait, transistors? Like the tiny things that power our computers and phones?
Yeah.
Those transistors?
Yep, those ones. Right now, most of those are made from silicon, right? But researchers, we're always on the hunt for new materials that can, blow silicon out of the water, make things even faster, even smaller. And guess what? PIs, especially with some clever sidechain modifications, they're showing some serious potential. They could be the next big thing in semiconductors.
So instead of relying on old school silicon, we could build those electronic components from these carbon-based molecules.
PIs, that's insane. It is pretty wild, right? And it opens up so many possibilities. Imagine electronics that are flexible, totally see-through, even biocompatible, meaning they can, hang out with your living tissues without freaking out, all because of these crazy PIs.
Okay, you're painting a picture of the future here, and I gotta say, I kind of love it. But let's break it down. How do these PI transistors actually work? Are they similar to, the silicon ones we use now?
So they work on the same basic principles, which is controlling this flow of electrons to make that on and off switch happen, the whole 0-1 thing that makes computers work. But the way they do it is really different. In your average silicon transistor, the electrons are zipping around in this super organized crystal lattice. But with a PI-based transistor, the electrons got to hop between these individual molecules.
Hopping electrons doesn't sound very efficient. Why not just stick with the zippy ones?
That's a thing. While it's true that hopping can be a little slower than that superhighway of a crystal lattice, it also has its perks. For one thing, organic materials like our buddies, the PIs, they're way more flexible than those stiff inorganic dudes.
Right. So we're sacrificing a little bit of speed, but we're gaining a whole lot of, adaptability.
Exactly. Think about it. We could have flexible displays, wearable sensors that actually, move with you, and even medical devices that can be implanted without your body freaking out.
Okay, trading a little speed for that kind of versatility, I think that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
So are there, different types of PI transistors, just like we have different silicon transistors for different jobs?
You're really on a roll with this. It's just like with silicon transistors. We've got P-type and N-type organic transistors. It all depends on whether they conduct positive or negative charges better. And get this, for the longest time, finding decent N-type organic semiconductors was a real pain.
Because you need both types to build the actual circuits and stuff, right?
Right. And that's where PIs really strut their stuff. They're like the superstars of N-type organic transistors.
So PIs are saving the day for organic electronics. That's incredible. But it's not just about how they conduct electricity, right? We can also process them at lower temperatures compared to the inorganic guys. And we might even be able to print them onto those flexible materials. That sounds like a game changer for manufacturing.
You're catching on quick. Yeah, we could be talking about cheaper, greener, and way more versatile electronics, all thanks to these little PIs. It's a pretty exciting time to be in the field, that's for sure.
This is seriously blowing my mind. Okay, so we've talked about nanowires and those shish kebab structures, which are amazing, by the way. But this paper also mentions something called nanobelts. What are those?
Picture a nanowire, but instead of being like a perfect cylinder, it's more like a flattened out ribbon. That's your nanobelt. They form a little differently, and their shape gives them some pretty cool properties.
So what's so special about the nanobelt shape? What makes it stand out from the crowd?
One of their biggest advantages is their surface area.
Oh.
They're so flat and thin, right? They have way more surface area exposed than something like a spherical nanoparticle of the same size.
And why is surface area such a big deal? I'm not a chemist, so break it down for me.
Think about it like this. The more surface area you have, the more places there are for molecules to interact with each other. And that's huge GE for things like catalysis, where you want molecules to react on a surface, and sensing, where you need those interactions to trigger a signal.
So a PI nanobelt, because it's got all that surface area, could be way better at speeding up a chemical reaction or detecting a specific molecule than, say, a PI nanoparticle.
You got it. More surface area, more potential for interaction, more power to the nanobelt. And it's not just the surface area. The fact that they're longer, like wires, also makes them great for applications where you need to move electrons or energy over a distance. Think of it like building circuits, but at the nanoscale.
Nanoelectronics build with these tiny PI nanobelts.
Yeah.
That is wild. It really highlights how important that self-assembly process is,
Yeah.
Just by tweaking those conditions, we can create these totally different structures with completely different properties.
It's mind-blowing, right? That's the beauty of nanoscience. When we figure out how to control stuff at this crazy, tiny scale, it's like a whole new world of possibilities opens up. We're basically writing the rules of a whole new type of chemistry.
Okay, I'm officially blown away. But before we get too lost in the nano world, I have a question. We've talked a lot about the awesome things about PIs and what they could do, but there's no such thing as a perfect material, right? What about their limitations? What are some of the challenges that scientists are still trying to figure out?
That's a great question because every superhero has their kryptonite, right? One of the things with PIs is that, they're amazing at absorbing light, but sometimes they're not as good at re-emitting it.
Okay, re-emitting light. Why is that important? I'm missing something here.
It depends on what you're trying to do, right? Let's take LEDs as an example, or even solar cells. Mm-hmm. You don't just want a material that gobbles up light. You want it to spit some of that light back out in a useful way.
So sometimes that whole absorbing and holding on to light thing can backfire.
Yeah, exactly. It's called fluorescence quenching, and it can really throw a wrench in the works for certain applications. It's like they're great at catching the light, but not so great at passing it on.
So it's all about that balance, finding that sweet spot where you get the properties you want without accidentally triggering the not so great ones. It sounds like a delicate dance.
Tell me about it. Finding the right combination of side chains, getting those assembly conditions just right, it's all part of the challenge. And honestly, it's what makes this field so exciting. It's like solving a complex puzzle.
Well, I'm hooked. Speaking of puzzles, the paper also mentioned chiral PIs. And honestly, that just sounds like something out of Harry Potter. What does that even mean? Chiral molecule. Fill me in.
It sounds way more complicated than it is. It's a basic idea in chemistry. Think about your hands, right? They're mirror images, right? Not exactly the same, but they have that same basic structure.
Yeah, good luck trying to fit your right hand in a left-handed glove. It ain't happening.
Exactly. Molecules can be chiral too. It means they come in these left-handed and right-handed forms. And just like your hands, those chiral molecules, they might look really similar, but they can interact with other molecules and even light in completely different ways.
So a left-handed PI molecule might act totally different from its right-handed twin.
Precisely. And when you're talking about self-assembly, that chirality thing, that can really shake things up.
How so? What happens when you toss chirality into the mix?
Imagine trying to waltz, right? But your partner is leading with the wrong foot. It's just not going to work. Same deal with chiral molecules. They get picky about their dance partners.
So they have preferences like, I only dance with left-footed molecules.
Right. And because they're so picky, these chiral PIs can assemble themselves into these crazy intricate structures that you just wouldn't see with their non-chiral buddies. It's like they've unlocked a whole new level of dance moves.
Like what? Give me an example. I got to know.
Okay, so picture this. Helical structures. We're talking PI molecules, but instead of just stacking in a straight line, they're twisting, turning, creating this helix shape like a microscopic spring.
A helix made entirely of PIs. That's bonkers. How do they even do that?
It's wild, right? But it's also super elegant. And get this, we can actually fine-tune the properties of that helix just by, messing with the chirality of the PIs.
So by choosing right-handed or left-handed PIs, we can like customize those helical nanostructures. That's insane. What makes them so special? What can we actually do with them?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. Researchers are all over that right now, and it's one of the most exciting areas of PI research. One of the coolest things is that because of their shape, these helix structures can interact with light in really unique ways, which makes them perfect for optics and photonics.
Optics, photonics, we're talking lasers, fiber optics, right. All that cool futuristic stuff.
You got it. Imagine these helical PI structures being used to build, like, super efficient optical filters, waveguides that can channel light with incredible precision, or even new types of lasers that do things we haven't even thought of yet. We could be talking about a whole new era of optical technologies.
It's like PIs are the key to unlocking a whole new world of light-based technologies. Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But before we go full-on Star Trek here, I have a question that our listeners might be wondering right now. Why should we care? I mean, this is all amazing, but how do these tiny molecules and their crazy structures actually affect our lives? Give us the practical applications.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Connecting the dots between the super small and our everyday lives. It's something researchers think about a lot. And while some of this stuff seems like it's straight out of sci-fi, the truth is PIs and other self-assembling molecules are already starting to pop up in our everyday lives.
Really? Give me some examples. I got to know.
Okay, so you know those super bright, super clear OLED screens that are everywhere these days?
Yeah.
Phones, TVs, even some fancy lighting panels.
OLED?
Right. They might not use PIs themselves, but they use similar organic carbon-based materials that light up when you run electricity through them. It's the same basic principle. And in the future, PIs could be what takes those screens to the next level. We could see even brighter colors, less energy use, and who knows, maybe even screens that we can fold up and put in our pockets.
Okay, so the next time I'm watching something on my OLED TV, I should be thanking a chemist. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. And it's not just screens. We've already talked about solar energy, right? But imagine a world where those solar panels are cheaper, more efficient, and flexible enough that you can, like, integrate them into clothing or buildings. That's the kind of crazy potential we're talking about here with PIs.
That's awesome. It sounds like we're on the verge of a whole materials revolution, and these tiny self-assembling PIs are leading the charge.
I like the way you think. That's a great way to put it. We're only just starting to understand what we can do with these self-assembling molecules, and honestly, the future is looking pretty bright.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? These tiny, tiny molecules, just by, like, arranging themselves in different ways, they could change everything.
It's like the elegance of it all, you know? It's what nature's been doing all along, how proteins fold, how those viruses, put themselves together, life building itself from the bottom up, and we're just starting to catch on.
Like peeking over nature's shoulder and being like, whoa, that's how you do it. So we were talking about PIs and solar cells earlier. Game changer, maybe. But, okay, what makes them so perfect for that job? I mean, it's not like they're the only things that can, like, soak up some sunshine.
Right. You see, you're asking the right questions. It's not just about grabbing that sunlight. It's what happens to that energy after it's caught. That's where PIs really, really shine.
Okay, you've got my attention. Lay it on me.
So PI molecule, right? It absorbs a photon of light, gets all excited, like electrons jumping up and down, woo, party time. But in a lot of materials, that energy, poof, gone. Turns into heat, which, let's be honest, not super helpful for a solar cell.
We want that energy to, like, do work, power our homes, not just make things a little warmer, right?
Exactly. And PIs, they get that. They're like, we're not going to let this energy go to waste. They can transfer that excited energy to their neighbors super efficiently. It's like a molecular hot potato, but way faster.
So it's that efficient energy handoff that makes them such rock stars at turning sunlight into, like, usable electricity?
You got it. And by getting all up in their business, like arranging the PIs in the solar cell just so we can create these like pathways for that energy, direct them right to the electrodes where we can be like, thank you very much, now become electricity.
Building a tiny little energy highway system, but at the molecular level, that's some seriously impressive engineering.
Right. But here's the best part. We don't even have to build the whole thing ourselves. Self-assembly to the rescue. We just got to understand the forces at play, those molecular rules, and then we can design a system where they practically put themselves together into these energy transferring networks.
We're like the architects, and the molecules are the construction crew. That's pretty cool. But you mentioned challenges earlier. What's standing in the way of these PI solar cells taking over the world?
Okay, so one of the biggest hurdles is making them even more efficient. Yeah, they're good at this whole absorbing and transferring energy thing, but like everything else, there are losses along the way. Nothing's perfect, you know.
Losses. Like what? Give me the technical details.
Well, some of that precious energy might escape, turn into heat before it gets to the electrodes, you know? Or the PIs themselves, they might, like, degrade over time. Not as good at their job as they used to be. It happens.
So it's about squeezing every last drop of performance out of them and making sure they can, like, go the distance, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's where the real artistry comes in. Chemists and material scientists, they're like experimenting with different side chains on those PIs, trying different arrangements, even combining them with other materials to make these hybrid solar cells that like take everything to the next level.
Hybrid solar cells. Okay, that sounds intriguing. What's the deal with those? Break it down for me.
It's like building the ultimate energy harvesting dream team. We take the strengths of different materials, combine them. For example, maybe we take our superstar PIs, amazing at catching sunlight, and team them up with these other materials that are like Olympic-level electron conductors.
So the PIs, they're like, okay, we got the sunlight, pass it off to the conductors who are like, our turn, we're taking it to the finish line.
You got it. It's about understanding the strengths of each player and then putting them in a position to win. We can get around some of the limitations of using just PIs by themselves by creating these awesome material mashups.
Molecular Legos, but for real. We're like building with molecules now. This is amazing.
I know, right? It's such a cool field to be in, and the more we learn about self-assembly, how to really control it, the closer we get to unlocking the full potential of these materials. It's going to be wild.
Okay, so PIs, they have a bright future, I'm convinced. But we can't forget about the sensors we were talking about.
Ah, yes, the sensory world. PIs are like naturally gifted at that. They sense everything, react to their environment. It's what makes them so good at being, well, sensors.
We were talking about how we can design them to like lock onto specific molecules, pollutants, disease markers, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But how do we actually build a sensor using them? What does that look like? Paint me a picture.
Okay, so imagine this. You've got a surface, right? Maybe it's like a tiny little chip, and it's coated with this thin film of PIs. But these aren't just any PIs. They've been carefully designed to, like, latch onto one specific target. Let's say, oh, I don't know, a nasty bacteria.
Okay, got it. So they're like the security guards of the molecular world, just waiting for that bacteria to show its face.
Exactly. Now, when that bacteria stumbles onto our sensor, bam, it bumps into the PIs and gets stuck. It's a trap. And here's the cool part, that little binding event, it changes the PIs themselves.
They change, like, what, did they change color or something? What kind of change are we talking
Oh,
about?
they've got options. They might start glowing differently, like they change their fluorescence. Or they might get better at conducting electricity. And guess what? We can measure that.
So we're basically watching the PIs, and if they start acting weird, we know our target is there. We could even tell how much is there based on how much they change.
You're getting it. And the best part is, because we can design those PIs to target pretty much anything, we can make sensors for anything.
We're talking like super sensitive bomb detectors, air quality monitors that can spot a single pollutant, even those futuristic health trackers that can diagnose diseases before you even feel sick.
You're getting way ahead of me, but yeah, that's the general idea. And because PIs can be incorporated into all sorts of things, thin films, nanoparticles, even those nanostructures we talked about, we've got a lot of options for building these sensors of the future.
Okay, so we've got the how of building the sensors.
Yeah.
But my brain is still stuck on the what. How do we even know which side chains to use to target a specific molecule? It seems like, I don't know, an impossible task. Like finding a needle in a haystack made of molecules.
I hear you. It's a massive chemical playground out there, and trying to find that perfect combination for every single application, that's the challenge. Luckily, we're not just throwing darts blindly. Chemists and material scientists, they're clever, right? They've got some tricks up their sleeves.
Like what? Spill the tea.
One of the coolest tools in their arsenal, combinatorial chemistry. Sounds intimidating, but it's actually pretty elegant.
Combinatorial chemistry. Okay, I'm listening.
So instead of making and testing each PI one at a time, which would take forever, we create this massive library of different PIs. Each one has a slightly different set of side chains, like a molecular mix and match.
So it's like speed dating for molecules.
Exactly. And then we let them loose. We expose the whole library to our target, whatever that might be, a molecule, a type of cell, whatever we're interested in. The PIs that like hit it off with our target, those are the winners.
The molecular matchmakers have spoken. Only the best matches get to move on to the next round. I love it.
And that, my friend, is how we narrow down the search. No more needles in haystacks.
Nope.
Combinatorial chemistry helps us find the most promising PIs without having to test every single one individually. It's all about working smarter, not harder, right?
It's amazing how precise we're getting with this stuff. It's like we're not just discovering materials anymore. We're designing them atom by atom.
That's what makes this such a mind-blowing time to be working in this field. We're not limited by what nature gives us anymore. We're becoming molecular architects, building from the ground up. And the more we learn about self-assembly, how to really fine-tune that process, who knows what amazing things we'll create.
I'm excited to find out. But let's switch gears for a sec. We talk about how PIs can interact with light and other molecules, but the paper also mentioned they have some pretty cool electrical properties. It even used the term self-doping. Now, I gotta be honest, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Self-doping, it does sound kind of futuristic, doesn't it?
Mm.
But it's one of the reasons why everyone's so hyped about PIs for things like organic electronics.
Okay, you gotta break this down for me. Self-doping, what is it and why should we care?
All right, let's do a quick review. Back to basics. How does electricity move through stuff? Think about a copper wire, a conductor. Electrons are zipping around, no problem, right? That's how we get our lights to turn on.
Right. Electricity 101.
Exactly. Now think about an insulator, like rubber or glass. The electrons are stuck, like super glued to the atoms. They can't move, which is why those materials are really bad at conducting electricity.
Okay, got it. Conductors, good. Insulators, bad. But where do our buddies, the PIs, fit into this?
That's the cool part. See, PIs, they're organic molecules, which means they're mostly carbon and hydrogen. And usually those organic guys, they're not the best conductors. They're more like insulators, hanging out with the rubber and the glass.
So how can we even use them for transistors and stuff if they're not good at conducting electricity? That seems like a pretty big problem.
But that's where that fancy self-doping comes in to save the day. You see, by making a few tweaks to the PI molecule, we can actually change its whole personality. We can turn that insulator into a semiconductor.
Wait, back up. You can take a molecule and change whether it conducts electricity just by messing with its structure.
You betcha. It's all about understanding how electrons like to move, you know?
Yeah.
And we can influence that by something we call doping.
Doping, like in sports. That's not allowed.
Don't worry, it's totally legal in the materials science world. It's actually a good thing. Basically, we sneak in a few impurities into a material to tweak its electrical properties. Think of it like adding a little spice to your recipe. It's all about enhancing the flavor. For example, we can take silicon, dope it with a bit of phosphorus, and boom, it becomes a much better conductor of electrons, which is super important for those N-type transistors we talked about.
So we're deliberately adding impurities to make the material more conductive.
Got it.
Got it.
Yeah.
But how does this self-doping thing work?
Okay, so with PIs, it's even cooler. We don't actually have to add anything from the outside. We can design the PI molecule itself to already have those doping properties baked in.
Built-in doping. What kind of molecular magic is this?
Remember our buddies, the side chains, those chemical groups we can attach to the PI. Well, it turns out those side chains are like little electrical control knobs. By choosing the right ones, we can create regions within the PI molecule that are electron-rich or electron-deficient.
So no need for external dopants. We're basically building those doping properties directly into the PI molecule itself. Mind it. Blown.
Pretty neat, huh? And that, my friend, is what we call self-doping. It's like the PI is doping itself.
This is amazing, but why go through all that trouble? What's so great about self-doping compared to just, like, adding the dopants directly?
Well, for one thing, we get way more control. With traditional doping, it's kind of like you sprinkle those dopants in and hope for the best. You don't always know exactly where they'll end up. But with self-doping, we're talking about precision engineering. We decide exactly where those electron-rich and electron-deficient areas go, which means we have way more control over how the material behaves electrically.
It's like the difference between, like, using a shotgun and a laser beam.
Exactly. And that kind of precision, that's the key to making those high-performance organic electronics we've been dreaming of.
So thanks to this self-doping superpower, PIs are, like, leading the charge in the world of organic transistors, sensors, all that good stuff.
You got it. And because they're organic, they can do things that those old-school inorganic semiconductors could only dream of.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about it. Organic things, they're bendy, flexible. We're talking smartphones that you can fold up and put in your pocket. Wearable sensors that actually move with you, not just like strapped to your wrist.
Hold on, are you talking about a phone that can bend without breaking? because sign me up.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And it's not just flexibility. Organic materials are often lighter, cheaper to make, and we might even be able to make them biocompatible so they can hang out inside your body without causing a riot.
Wait, so we're talking electronics that are not only cooler and more adaptable, but also potentially better for the environment and safer to use in medical devices.
You're getting it. And PIs, with their self-doping abilities and all-around versatility, they're leading the pack.
Okay, I'm officially on board the PI train. But let's talk about the design process for a sec. It sounds incredibly complex. You mentioned combinatorial chemistry, which sounds like a mouthful. But are there other tools that scientists are using to design these PIs with the exact properties they need?
Oh, absolutely. Combinatorial chemistry is awesome, don't get me wrong, but we've got a whole toolbox. Another one of my favorites is computational chemistry.
Computational chemistry? What is that? Like chemistry, but on a computer?
You got it. We're talking powerful computers, fancy algorithms, the whole 9 yards. We can actually predict how a molecule will behave before we even make it.
Wait, hold on. We can build a virtual PI molecule on a computer and see how it acts in the real world.
Pretty much. We can model everything, its electronic structure, what it looks like, how it interacts with other molecules.
That's amazing. It's like having a chemistry lab in the Matrix.
Okay.
We can try out a million different designs without wasting any time or materials.
Exactly. This whole test it before you build it thing has been a game changer for fields like materials, science, and drug discovery. It's way faster and cheaper than the old school methods.
So computational chemistry, it's like having a superpower, letting you peek into the future of materials.
I like the way you think. It's not magic, but it's pretty darn close. It helps us make much smarter decisions about which PIs are worth making in the lab, saving us tons of time and money.
It's incredible how much these two approaches, computational chemistry and experimental chemistry, work together, right? Like two sides of the same coin, pushing each other forward.
Absolutely. And as computers get even faster and our models get even better, watch out, world. We're going to see some seriously amazing new materials.
I can't wait. But before we get too caught up in the digital world, let's talk about the real-world implications of all this.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of cool potential applications, but I want to know, what are some of the challenges in taking these awesome PI-based technologies from the lab to the real world?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something that keeps scientists and engineers up at night. One of the biggest hurdles is scalability.
Scalability, like scaling a mountain. What does that even mean in this context?
So making a tiny amount of a new material in a lab, piece of cake, but making tons of it at a price that people can actually afford, that's a whole different ballgame.
Ah, so it's not enough for it to be cool, it also has to be practical.
Exactly. For a new technology to be successful, it can't just work. It has to work on a large scale and be affordable. Otherwise, it'll never leave the lab.
Makes sense. So what are some of the things that affect how easy or difficult it is to scale up PI production?
Well, for one thing, some PIs are just harder to make than others. Some of them need like a million different steps, which can get expensive.
So simpler is better.
In general, yeah. But it's not always that simple. Sometimes that really awesome, high-performing PI needs a more complicated recipe. It's all about finding that balance, you know?
Performance versus practicality.
You got it. And that's where the chemists and engineers come in, always looking for ways to make things more efficient, using cheaper ingredients, streamlining the whole process.
So it's like optimizing a factory production line, but at the molecular level.
You're catching on. And this whole scalability thing, it's essential if we want to see these PI-based technologies out in the world making a real difference.
This is so cool. It's not just about, like, making cool molecules in a lab. We're talking about technologies that could potentially change the world.
I agree. And the best part is, we're just getting started. There's so much more to discover, to invent, to create. The future is looking bright.
It's like we've stepped into this whole new world of material science, right? Like we're not stuck with whatever nature happens to give us anymore. We can build stuff from scratch, atom by atom, and give it the exact properties we want. It's like molecular superpower.
That's the beauty of self-assembly, isn't it? We're taking notes from nature, learning those tricks that have been around for like billions of years, how molecules know how to find each other, build those incredible structures. It's all about harnessing that power.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And speaking of amazing, I wanted to circle back to something we kind of glossed over earlier. PIs and this whole photocatalysis thing, that one really caught my attention. It sounds kind of like, I don't know, Star Trek using light to make chemistry happen.
I know, right? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's real. And PIs, they're like the stars of the show when it comes to this whole light-driven chemistry thing.
Okay, you got to explain this to me like I'm 5. What is photocatalysis?
Yeah.
And what makes PI so good at it?
Okay, so you know how plants use sunlight to make food, right? Photosynthesis.
Yes, sixth grade biology.
Photocatalysis is like that, but instead of plants making sugars, we can use special materials like PI to use sunlight to kickstart all sorts of other chemical reactions.
So we're taking inspiration from nature, but instead of making like a salad, we're making what kind of stuff can we make with this photocatalysis magic?
Get this. We can make hydrogen fuel from water.
Hold up. We can take water, shine some light on it, add a sprinkle of PI magic, and boom, we've got hydrogen fuel.
That's the general idea. Hydrogen is like the dream fuel, right? Clean burning only produces water as a byproduct, and you can use it to power those fuel cells, which basically turn chemical energy directly into electricity.
Okay, so we're talking about potentially changing the game for like the entire energy industry, right? Clean, renewable energy, all thanks to PIs and sunshine.
You're getting it. And remember how we talked about how good PIs are at absorbing light, how they can transfer that energy so efficiently?
Yeah, like a molecular hot potato, right?
Exactly. Well, in this case, they're passing that energy to water molecules, splitting them apart and releasing that precious hydrogen.
So those PIs are like tiny little solar-powered water splitters.
That's a great way to put it. And the best part is, researchers are figuring out how to do this using regular visible light, not some crazy expensive light source. We're talking about using the sun as it is.
That's what makes this so cool. It's not just some laboratory trick. It's a real sustainable way to produce clean energy. But water splitting? That's not the only thing photocatalysis is good for, right?
No way. We can use it for tons of different reactions. Think about pharmaceuticals, those medicines that keep us healthy, or agrochemicals, the things farmers use to help grow our food. We can make a lot of those using photocatalysis.
So we're talking about like a whole new way of making the stuff we need. And it's all thanks to light and these incredible PIs.
Exactly. And get this. Photocatalysis can actually be cleaner and more efficient than the old ways of doing things.
Cleaner and more efficient. Sign me up. But how? What makes it so much better?
Well, think about how we usually do chemistry, right? Big factories, lots of heat, harsh chemicals, lots of steps. It's messy, takes a lot of energy, and you often end up with like a bunch of stuff you don't want, byproducts.
Yeah, not exactly environmentally friendly.
Exactly. But with photocatalysis, we can make the reactions much more precise, target what we want to make. Plus, we're using sunlight, free energy, which means we don't have to rely on fossil fuels as much.
Okay, so it's better for the planet.
Yeah.
A&D is more efficient.
Yeah.
That's what I call a win-win.
Right. PIs and photocatalysis, they have the potential to really shake things up, make a lot of industries cleaner and more sustainable.
It's truly amazing, and it's all thanks to those scientists and engineers out there pushing the boundaries, coming up with these incredible inventions. I'm so glad we got to dive into the world of PIs with you today, expert speaker. This has been an amazing conversation.
The feeling is mutual. Always a pleasure to geek out about science with someone who gets it.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us. We hope this deep dive into the world of Perylene Imides has inspired you to, look a little closer at the world around you. You never know where those tiny, self-assembling molecules might be hiding, quietly changing the world. Keep those questions coming, and we'll see you next time.